I'll be in the back, so you don't get
Oh, so we don't get You can tell him when to duck.
Yeah,
Right.
just watch your step and watch your head.
Okay. You want to go in front of me?
No. Why? You want to trust me behind you?
Where are you from? Where are you from?
Everybody from Buffalo, right? Okay, so you are aboard the USS. So it's USS The Sullivans, that's part of the name. And it's also the only Navy ship that's named after more than one person. It was named after the 5 Sullivans. We're going to talk about that when we get inside here, but it's following through. Let's go. What they considered officers' country, and that's also the combat information center. So they would get information about where other ships were around the area, and they would mark it on that chart that's on the outside, and the people on the inside had to read it, so they wrote backwards. That's how they were able to read it. We're in what was the wardroom. This is where the officers used to have their meals, but we've turned it into a memorial for the 5 Sullivan brothers. So I'll tell you about the 5 Sullivan brothers. Anybody know what that story is? You know? Okay. After Pearl Harbor happened, George, who was the oldest of the Sullivan brothers, got together with his brothers and they said, let's go join the Navy, but we want to serve together. So they joined the Navy, they went through training together, and they asked to be assigned on a ship together. So they were assigned to the USS Juno. You see a picture of the Juno behind you over there? That is a cruiser. So during the Battle of Guadalcanal, the Juno got hit by a shell from a Japanese light cruiser called the Nagara. When it hit them, it didn't sink them, but it disabled their maneuverability. So they were going to go back to port to get repaired. On the way back, a Japanese submarine noticed that they were having trouble maneuvering.
What time since?
Pardon?
Since. What time since?
The submarine?
Yeah.
It's underwater boat.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to see one when we get over here. So anyway, the submarine fired 2 torpedoes at the Juno, hit the Juno in the middle of the ship, amidship, and that's also where they store the ammunition. So the ship blew up and broke in half and sunk in 43 seconds. 4 of the brothers were down below and were lost with the ship. George was rumored to have been going around to the different life rafts looking for the brothers, and then George was never seen again. So all 5 Sullivan brothers were lost. There was a rumor that went around that said because of this, the Department of Defense said that siblings can't join together or serve together, but that's not true. It was just a recommendation by the Department of Defense. So, if you look over here, there's George, there's the mother and father of the Sullivan brothers, and one of the granddaughters, great-granddaughters actually, comes here once a year whenever we have ceremonies for the Sullivans to visit. Those are actual letters that came in from the people and so on. Here's the Battle of Guadalcanal. I already pointed out the Juno.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the Battle of the Guadalcanal. And there was so many ships sunk in this area that they changed the name to Iron Body Sound. Iron Bottom Sound. Okay, that's because they had a lot of ships sunk in here. The Juno sunk over here. Any questions about that? Okay, we're going to go travel on.
Gonna suck.
Oh, Jim.
5-inch gun. This is primarily used for ship-to-ship or ship-to-shore. It's not very effective for anti-aircraft because it doesn't move fast. It's a 5-inch 38. And the way that they determine the caliber on a gun is they measure the barrel. The opening of the barrel is 5 inches. The length of the barrel is divide that by 5, 38. There's the 5-inch. The other one back there we have a 3 and a 50. The barrel weight is 150 long. Here is called a Highline Chair. And basically what that means is that you're going to use that to transfer people from this boat to that boat. But when they did that, these boats were both underway and they were about 200 feet apart. So that created a lot of turbulence in the water there. So you had two people working this Highline Chair on both ships. The smaller line moved the chair back and forth. The bigger line made sure that the tension, the chair was up on top. Okay, this device is called an AMROC. This is an anti-submarine rocket. That's where the name came from. This was a device developed by the British. And what would happen is they would use gunpowder to fire these off in a pattern in front of the ship. And it was for submarines. But in order for this to work, it had to actually hit a submarine. So these are contact lines. So unless it hit, it wasn't going to go off. They weren't real effective, so there's a whole bunch of these in the bottom of the ocean. It'll never go off. They're going to be just what like they are. Now, if they fired this whole bank at one time, there was 40 tons of pressure on the ship. It actually would kind of jerk the ship a little bit. So there's another set of them over here. These are 40mm anti-aircraft guns. They were made by a company out of Sweden called Waterfront, and they were neutral during the war. So you would see the same gun arrangement on every Navy vessel during World War II. Whether it was Japanese, German, American, Russian, it didn't matter. This was the premier gun system for anti-aircraft. They would fire 40mm shells, and they could fire as fast as you could load them. So they would have a guy standing here, a guy standing there, and they would load a shell casing into that hopper up there, and they were being passed out through here. So they get passed out, given to this guy, a guy in each chair, and the way they aimed these guns was they would turn these. And one of them would turn the mount this way, and the other one was up and down. And they would aim it and fire that way. That was how they did it. They also had 20mm guns on these ships, but they found out that they weren't real effective against aircraft. Unless you hit a real vital area or you hit the pilot, the plane could keep moving. So these, if they hit near the plane, they'd take them down. Over here,
Just take a minute to like that.
these are torpedo tubes. And the way this works is you would drop this netting, and this whole device would turn out and they could fire torpedoes. The torpedoes were run by two different types of motors. One was an electric motor, and the other one was actually a kerosene-driven motor. But they could reach knots of about 30 knots, which is extremely fast. They could outrun any ship that was out there. They couldn't necessarily outmaneuver the ship. The ship could outmaneuver them. Now we have a setup over here, a bank over there, and there used to be another bank up here. But we removed it because it's easier for people to travel back and forth.
How do you shoot these off of the boat that's this tall?
How do you shoot? They go out. This opened up.
You just
This all
drop
dropped. This whole thing turned out, and they would fire it with compressed air. And as soon as it hit the water,
Would it just go straight?
it would just go.
Yeah.
They couldn't maneuver it. Any questions?
Okay.
We're going to go that way and back.
That's a big bomb. Yeah, no. Too heavy.
Yay.
Don't scare me.
They just way more to talk about this area. So when you're in combat and your ships are out in the ocean, that was the primary way they would communicate. They didn't want to use radio. They didn't want to get so they had the flag that was one way. They had radio, and they also had this. This is Morse code. This would be a light. They would aim it at the ship they want to mount. Everybody can get in. I'll make more room. Make more room. Okay. So this is the pilot house. This is where they would steer the ship. The guy standing here is called a helmsman. He would be the one steering the ship. Next to him would be a guy where that device with the two arms is. That's called a lee helm. And there would be a guy on that as well.
told him
That's
already.
funny, huh?
I told him already.
Yeah. All right. This ship had 289 people on board.
This is where they cooked everything?
This is where they cooked everything. Now, they don't use any open flames on these ships. Everything's done either by steam or electric. And they cook 4 meals a day. They do breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a meal called midnight rations, or mid-rats. And that was for the guy that's going to stand watch from midnight to 4 in the morning. He could go down into the mess deck and maybe pick up a sandwich or something. They really didn't cook a full meal at that point. So, the mess deck, where they eat their meal, is 2 levels below. So they had to go down the ladders like we've just gone down. They had to go down 2 sets of ladders to get to the mess deck. But they don't have dumb waiters. They don't have any way to get it down there other than to carry it down by hand. So they had these big trays. They'd hook on their belts, they'd have their arm out here holding onto it, and then they'd go down 2 sets of ladders and put it in the steam trays as they went through. The reason the Navy did that, the Navy is really high on tradition. In the old wooden ships, they cooked with an open flame, but they cooked on the main deck. You don't want to bring an open flame inside a wooden ship. It wouldn't take long for that ship to be gone. So the Navy, in their infinite wisdom, took 175 years to decide that that tradition was probably not a good tradition. This Fletcher-class destroyer is the last class of ship that doesn't have the galley and the mess deck on the same level. So when we go to the other ship, you're going to see that the galley and the mess deck are all on the same level. Every other ship prior to this had them just like this, separated by several decks. And they had to carry the food down for everybody. So you can see that that probably wasn't very efficient,
Probably got
especially
really
for
hot.
289 men. All set? Any questions?
Was this the blender?
That is a blender. They would make their own breads, their own concoctions. In fact, a lot of times what would happen is they'd make that at night, and somebody would smell that bread and come in here and try to get some bread.
Yeah.
They would cook them in these ovens, and these ovens have a plate that actually floats, so that if the ship rolled, you didn't have the bread going like this. And so it would hold that. These are electric ovens. So that's how they would make sure that the bread loaf stayed the way it was supposed to.
It's like a magnet under it, huh?
Pardon?
It's like a magnet, right?
No, it's
Hold
just,
the
it's
plate.
just a floater. The plate just floats like this. So the whole plate would do this. So if the ship tilted this way, the plate would go like that, to make up for the movement of the ship. Any other questions? Okay.
I'm gonna tell the kids I want one of these for Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Black and Decker make those?
Champion?
Oh, okay.
That should about do it.
They're very nice.
Barber shop, everybody had to have regulation haircut. That's where they were going.
For your haircut. That's tiny.
They would have several of them on either side of the ship. You could actually walk on this barrel. When they got really hot, they would stop low. And they got to the point where they could stop pretty fast. So if they were overheated and can't continue firing when they're hot, they will eventually get warped. So as soon as they got to a certain temperature, they would pull them off, put new barrels on, and then start firing again. These are the cannons. They hold about 60 rounds, and they could get dropped off the side, and they could set the depth that they wanted to go off on, and they would go off on by track. So they would set it to like 300 feet, and they didn't have the other thing they would export. And the reason the max are 300 feet out there is because submarines during World War II could only go down about 300 feet. If they went any further, they'd crush. We wouldn't have to worry about hitting them with depth. They did it on their own. Any questions?
Say again?
13 guys sat in there.
Oh boy, it's too many.
Yeah, stand right there. Jim, stand there.
No? Why not?
Anybody else want it?
Sit down.
Thanks, guys.
This can actually hone in on a target and follow it.
That's fit on every side? Yeah, better than on the ground.
So I forgot to tell you, this ship had a crew of 1,100. They had 250 officers and 250 Marines. If you served on this ship, you were not allowed in this room unless you had a job in here. And they would have a Marine at both of these hatches, and he would be armed with a 45. And if you tried to come in here, he would shoot you. And part of the reason for that is this particular missile has nuclear warhead capability.
Great.
So they wouldn't want you in here messing around. So this system, this is a conveyor system that would move the missiles back and forth, and this is a carousel. This entire device rotates and gets up to the missile up to that black rail system up there. We'll pick the missile up and put it into an assembly room, and I'll show you more of it when we get over the other side.
Just driving around, just need to get to the windows, just hang out. From here. It's amazing. So it's just...
Okay, so I'll let you move in and see the fish on the rack.
I'm just losing it. Really disorienting.
So here's your butterfly doors that open up. They would open up, this would come out, and they'll put it on the launcher. These would close and this would open.
It's my favorite sign.
Come on in, put it there, make room for everybody. This is the post office. When I was in the Navy, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have any way of communicating other than through snail mail or slow mail. Okay, so the way the Navy is set up, there's two post offices, main post offices. They're called Fleet Post Office, FPOs. So you were either on the West Coast or on the East Coast, depending on where you were either FPO Norfolk or FPO San Diego. And all the mail that was mailed out, if you were on the East Coast, would go to Norfolk. And Norfolk knew where your ship was. They would pack it into a canvas bag for your ship, and then it would be shipped out to you either by plane or another ship going out. But it took on an average of about 2 weeks for you to get mail from home. And as I said, this is the only communication we had. They did have shortwave radios on some of the ships that would allow you to, if your spouse or a significant other had a shortwave radio, you might be able to get time on that, but very rare. So mail was the most important thing at that time. And what they would do when mail came in, they would make an announcement and they would say, mail call, mail call. And when they did that, if somebody was going to get the mail, you did not want to get out in their way. They would knock you out of the way. If you fell in front of them, they would just run right over you. They didn't care. They wanted to get the mail, and that was all that mattered at that time.
My uncle broke his ankle with a flat screen TV once.
All right, as you go by this room, this is where the chief petty officer slept. In the Navy, the ranks start at E1 for enlisted, and they work up to E9 for enlisted. After that, they become O, O1 for officers, and so on. So, in the military, rank.
These are probably bigger.
Yeah, but
That's literally nothing.
Something.
That's not what I remember thinking.
Oh boy.
Mr. Ryan, would you mind driving this to the first flag? This is designed first by stealth to shower the target. And then for this, a little bit west towards
So this is the mess hall, and this is for the enlisted men, up to E6. E6 has their own little mess hall over there. And the chief petty officers have another mess hall in there. So from E1 to E4, E5, you would eat here. E6, you would go in there. If you notice, all the tables have lips on them, except for those. Those have lips that flop up from underneath. And the reason the lips are there is when you put your tray down, the ship's doing this, you don't want it to slide off. Now, some of the old-time salts that had been in the Navy for a long time would take a piece of white bread and wet it, stick it on the table, and then put their tray on top of it, and the tray would never move. However, even though this is called a mess hall, you had to clean up anything that you created. If you didn't, and you got caught leaving a mess, you would be working in here no matter what your job was, until they felt you got the right idea to clean this place up. Okay? Any questions? We're going to go through the chow line over here.
It's about time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the chow line. Actually, you'd be coming in from this way. You have your trays, you slide them along, and there'd be gentlemen on the other side serving you food. And they would serve you whatever the meal for the day was. One of the rules in the military and the Navy especially was take all you want, but eat all you take. So you didn't want to load up your plate and then try to leave with some of it on you. You could come back if you wanted to. Now, the ship I was on, we had a crew of 500, but we carried 2,500 Marines. And the Navy had head of the chow line privileges. So if you were all standing in line here and you were all Marines and I came to get something to eat, I would come up here, I'd get this, and I'd cut in, and I would get my meal, and I'd have a whole bunch of Marines swearing at me behind me. But they had no choice. They had head of the chow line privileges for the Navy. The other thing I always noticed when I was in the Navy is that as you went along the line and people were serving you food, they all were smiling at you. And I could never figure out if they were happy to feed me my food or they did something to the food and that I didn't know about. It could be either one. I don't know. Any questions in here? No, these are called coffin lockers. And the reason they're coffin lockers is they open up like that does, and you store all your personal belongings, your military uniforms and everything inside the locker in here. Now, if you happen to be an E4 or an E5, you might get one of the bigger lockers. It depends on how many E4s or E5s are in here that outrank you. And the way they determine that was your date that you received your E5 right. So if I got mine in March, you got yours in December, I outrank you. That's the way it works. This is where we have the sleepover. So the kids that come in, we have the Sea Cadets, which is a military type organization. They come here, they'll spend a week, 2 weeks in here, and they work just like the Navy works. Then we'd have Boy Scouts and we'd have school events that would come in and they get to sleep in here and they'd get their meals in the chow hall just like we just went through. So. And then the spare bunks, in case we picked up somebody at sea that was extra, we would put them in there. And when the ship I was on when we were in Vietnam, Our job was to pick up plane crews. They were told to ditch in the ocean if they could, because if they ditched on land, they're going to get picked up by the Vietcong. If they ditched in the ocean, we would pick them up. And in the time that I was there for a year, we picked up 3 crews on our ship, and they would be assigned these extra bunks. That's what they would see. They're just chilling in the ocean, and believe me, they're chilling.
Yeah.
But the ocean isn't that warm. Anyway, but yes, they would be waiting.
Like a dead buddy.
That helmet weighed.
Oh, excuse me.
And to make it even worse, the shoes that they have on, if you look, they're about this thick of metal. And that was to give them enough non-buoyancy so that they could sink to the bottom. And then they would walk around. They would have an air hose attached to them and a rope attached to them. And the rope was how they retrieved them. Because there was no way in that outfit that you were going to swim to the surface. It just wouldn't happen. Way too much weight. You just walk around. Yeah, that's what you did. And that was for salvage operations and so on. Remember we talked about the blue nose? Well, there's the certificate you get. So they give you the date, your name, when you crossed, the whole bit. So it's kind of interesting. I have 2 of these. I have 2 for the equator.
Wait, so did you have to rub your
You've been
face
around.
on some?
Pardon?
Did you have to rub your face on some?
Just once. The second time, I got to be the one causing the pain. The first time I received the pain, the second time I was causing the pain. Yes, you have to, if you don't do every steps of the ceremony, you don't become a shellback. So then you'll have to go through it again another time.
It's like extremely easy.
And we only have one guy on the ship that refused to do it. And so
I'm already good.
yeah, but they never gave him a certificate or anything, so he never became a shellback. That's very good.
My rookie team, we got to
Really?
All the way in. Everybody, don't be bashful. I only bite you. Okay, this is the ward room. This is where the officers ate their meals. They were officers and gentlemen by an act of Congress, and they were supposed to maintain the
Survey phase will reveal potential.
So there were 3 things they could not discuss in here.
Like the
They could not discuss religion, they could not discuss politics, and they could not discuss religion. Those were three conversations that were off limits. They would actually have a Marine that was standing in the corner there and the corner there. And if the conversation got heated, the Marine might walk over and say, "Excuse me, sir, you need to hold on to be." So you either you calm down, or they would escort you out. If they escorted you out, the captain would not be real happy. Now, if you'll notice, none of these tables have lips on them. They're gentlemen, they're supposed to be able to control themselves. And if you look all the way back in the case, all the way back there, you'll see fine china. That's what they ate, fine china. They did not have trays or anything, and they would serve their meals. They also paid for their meals. It was just a nominal amount, but they did pay for their meals. Behind them is the officer's lounge. So they could go back there, they could play cards, they could discuss anything they wanted to discuss back there. However, no fisticuffs. If you got into a fight, you were in a lot of trouble. The captain would not be your best friend at that point. You would find out what it was like to go to captain match, and it wasn't a good thing. So, any questions in here? Oh, by the way, all that china that you see back there was made here in Buffalo. Then Buffalo China had a contract with the Navy, and they made all the china for the Navy. No questions? All right, let's swirl our way out here.
Because they know that defeated the Allies after re-entering the continent somewhere. So the question is really where. The options for the invasion were limited, and they had already tried unsuccessfully in other locations. 2 years earlier in France, the Allies tried to capture a fort.
Oh, those are nice.
So I can see two gentlemen that are gonna have fun with the submarine. Okay, this is the captain's office. Generally speaking, you don't wanna be here. If you're up here and you're an enlisted man, you're in trouble. Somehow or another you did something you shouldn't have done. On a Navy ship, the captain is judge, jury, and executioner. He decides what you did wrong, he decides what your punishment's going to be, and then he has it executed. The Navy still has 3 days bread and water. And so what that means is you get put in the brig and you get assigned 3 days bread and water. They will bring you all the water you want to eat and all the bread you want, all the water you want to drink and all the bread you want to eat for 3 days. And, oh, by the way, you still did your job. So a Marine would come and get you, they'd take you out, you'd do your work, you come back, you go back into the brig. Unfortunately, I can't show you the brig, it's down below when I'm going down there. But they do have a brig on the ship. Now, if they assigned you 3 days bread and water, they couldn't reassign you that again for 30 days. And then after 30 days, let's say the captain said, we're going to do that 3 times. You'd get 3 days bread and water, 30 days normal, 3 days bread and water, 30 days normal, and then 3 days bread and water. And they did do that. So we had 2 gentlemen on our ship that got assigned 3 days bread and water.
You never did?
Pardon?
You never did?
No, they never caught me. That's how it works, you try not to get caught. Any questions? I'm going to ask you, you can look in here, this is an officer's stateroom. That's kind of the condition that they had on a ship. And the bigger the ship, the better the setup for the officers and for the enlisted men as well. But you go ahead and look in there, and then we're going to go up this ladder. I'm going to go up there and I'll wait for you.
This is about the size of my dorm.
Right, so it's not bad.
Get out. You get some.
A little good, come on.
Now I'm going to give you a little bit of information. You know who David Robinson is, right? Basketball player? Basketball player?
Heard the name.
He was 7'2", and he joined the Navy. He was assigned to a ship, and he also was assigned on a submarine in the time that he was an officer because he went through officer training. But can you imagine 7'2" in these
Right.
places? Just
He's probably got back
you get
problems.
great connection again. So a little bit of Navy terminology. Have you noticed that I never said we're going to go upstairs? We're not going to go. We didn't go downstairs. There are no stairs on a Navy ship. These are all ladders. There's no floors on a Navy ship. These are all decks. There's no walls on a Navy ship. They're all bulkheads. And there's no posts. They're all stanchions. And there's no roof. It's an overhead. Those are all Navy terminologies that you have to learn. I spent 6 years in the Navy, and most of the time I would piss off the chief because I'd say, oh, you know, I was downstairs having a meal, and he'd get pissed. No, there's no downstairs on a ship. But I did it on purpose. It was fun, and I got a little enjoyment out of it. Until he decided that I didn't need the enjoyment, then he would do something. So anyway, that's the terminology on a Navy ship. Now we're going to go out, and we're going to see the 6-inch guns.
Come on, buddy.
Waiting to see what you would say.
Sure.
out when they're off. I can see. Oh yeah.
Should have said Michael Jordan. I would have known that. But
And that looks like a really nice opening to get in and out of there, doesn't it? Well, that's not how they did it. This is how they did it, right here. See the white section? That's the part they got in and out with. This was mounted up there. We had it there.
Ready?
That's the ship's bell. Oh, come on. Yank that sucker.
That's loud.
So they might ring that bell on the way in port, just to let people know they're coming in or whatever. There's also a fog bell that they use that's amidship on the other ship. And then they would just let everybody know where they were in the fog because you couldn't see them. These projectiles, these are 6-inch projectiles. They weigh about 100 pounds, roughly. A 16-inch gun on a battleship, the projectiles weigh 2,000 pounds. So it's like throwing a Volkswagen at you. This is the 6-inch gun. This is the only museum ship in the world that still has a triple mount 6-inch turret on it. A battleship has a triple mount, but they have the 16-inch gun. And there's several battleship museums that are on that. So, you're getting to see history here. That's all they have. Any questions? We're going to go down this ladder. This ladder is probably the steepest ladder so far. There's a little step off here. Make sure you don't miss that. All right? We'll wait till everybody. But they call it the sail on a submarine. But it's kind of common. That's where, if you've seen any of the movies, submarines, where they go out and they look around, that's where they would go up. Inside this kind of yeah. Well, if they're underwater, they're not going to use it. Above water, they're like we are. That dome would have been crystal clear, but the pond has made it like your headlights on a car get clogged. I want you to notice this, and they use teak wood for two reasons on submarines. One is it's a very dense wood, and so the water and the weather isn't affected very much. But the most important reason is if it broke off, it wouldn't float, it wouldn't sink. So that didn't give away your position.
Beaver? What does that mean? Hey, yeah.
I think I got over it. They didn't prepare
You got
us.
over it?
Well, I told her that I did the sleepover. They just didn't prepare us.
Oh boy.
Next year. This is the forward torpedo boom. So you can see the torpedo tube. So this boat has gone through two different configurations. If you look at the model behind you over here, that was the original configuration. And its primary job was to go after surface ships. That's why it had guns on it and torpedoes. When you look down at the lower one, That's the configuration that it currently has, and that classified this as what they call a hunter-killer class. And its job was to go after other submarines, and that's what it did. Now, this is an escape hatch.
You should know that.
If you kind of look up inside, you'll see there's a hatch to the side, and this whole device here would have a hatch that would come down and seal this off. So if you were trying to escape, two people could get in there, they would close it down, flood it with water, they'd go out the other hatch, close that hatch, knock on the hull, so that they know, get the water out, two more people come up in. That was the only means of escape when you were underwater. So, that was like, I also want you to notice that there's a bunk in here. And we'll explain to that later when we get down further into the ship. Or in the boat. There were 85 men on this boat. And when they went out at the beginning, they had to bring on all the provisions they could bring on. And as a result, the shower in here was filled with food. And there was about 5 days worth of food in there. So that meant for the first 5 days, nobody could take a shower. With 85 men. Yes.
Fun.
And no like air circulation? Like it's just-
Kind of, sort of, yeah, maybe a little bit. They had air that circulated, but it was really,
It wasn't fresh air.
all the time. They did have scrubbers that would take some of the
Stench.
carbon dioxide out and put fresh air in, but not very much. 3 heads on this, 3 bathrooms. There's one of them right there. That's for the officers. So you couldn't, if you were enlisted, unless you were in general quarters, you weren't using that head. You had to go back and use one of the other heads. So that was strictly for us. These yellow don't move, so be careful when you're walking through. I'm going to show you how to get through these hatches. And I highly recommend that this is the way you get through. But you're on your own as you figure it out if you don't like my way. So when you get here, I do this. I straddle it like this. And don't come straight up because there's a nice heavy bar right here. And if you sit straight up, you'll hurt your head.
Well, good. Go ahead, guys. Juma, go. You go. Juma.
Go both feet in the air. We go officer's stateroom. This is where he slept. And over here, you see other officers' staterooms. Okay, as you're looking in, on your right is the officer's stateroom, on your left is the captain's. Okay, this is for chief petty officers, so E7, E8, or E9.
Like 4 people live in there.
Is the hatches that are open on this submarine. So if they were going to submerge, they would announce that the boat is about to submerge and to close all hatches. And then as they close the hatches, those lights would turn green. If you tried to submerge with just one of them open, and you managed to get underwater, you would never come up again. Because there was no way you would be able. There was no way you would be able to close that hatch. The water pressure would be just too great. So they wanted to make sure that every one of them were green before they went down. This brings you up into the conning tower. There used to be a ladder there, but we've kind of blocked it off, so nobody could try to get up there. So it gets up into the conning tower. Now, all these valves that you see on the side, them big wheels that you see, those wheels are for the bow planes. And what they do is right now they're sitting up like this, they'd go down, and then they would control the submarine going up and down. Those valves and everything that you see in here would flood either the ballast tanks that are on the outside of the hull. They would flood them with water to allow it to go down, and then they'd use compressed air to blow the water out to allow it to surface. It's the only Navy vessel that sinks on purpose and sometimes even comes back up. One of the reasons for red lights is so that your eyes can adjust to the dark. So that if this was surface and you wanted to get out to be a lookout or whatever, your eyes have got to be adjusted to the dark. So that red light keeps them accustomed to the dark. But the most important reason is you can see a white light for miles and miles on the ocean, even a small one. But a red light, you can't. It dissipates almost immediately. So that was the most important reason. I have heard rumors, and I don't know for a fact, that the Navy is going to green lights because it works better. But I don't know that for a fact. I've just heard some rumors that that's what they're going to do. So this is the control room. Now, one of the things that happens on a submarine is every individual on a submarine has to learn every job on a submarine. That's how they get their dolphins. So all submariners have dolphins that they earn. And the way they earn it is to learn every job on a boat. And once they've learned every job, they go to the chief petty officer, the chief of the boat it's called, and they would say, I'm ready to take my test. And he would take you around and say, okay, tell me what that valve does. And you'd have to tell him. And then if he was satisfied, then you would go before an officer board, and they would ask you questions. And once they were all satisfied, then you earned your dolphins. Once you earned your dolphins, you had them until you went to another boat. If it was a different configuration or whatever, you had to learn that boat. Okay?
Again, like it too.
This is the best step. This is where they eat their meal. There was another table here we visited. That's the galley. That's where they cook all meals for everybody to cook. So, I go do 4 meals a day, right? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then we do that all out of here. Again, 85 men on here. So, it was quite crowded. And you ate in shifts. We're almost done. This is the bunk room. There was actually another bulkhead here that had bunks on either side. Three on either side, 3 on either side. They did not have enough bunks on this boat for all 85 men. So they used a system called hot racking. And what that means is if I'm on the watch and you're sleeping, I'd come over here, wake you up, you'd get out, I'd get in. Now, you remember I showed you the bunks in the torpedo room? There's bunks in the aft torpedo room. You could volunteer to sleep in them if you're sleeping with the torpedo. And if you did, the bunk was yours. You didn't have to share it with anybody else. Because there weren't enough crazy men on board to do that. I say men because this time in World War II, there were no women on board any kind of Navy vessel. Okay? Maybe a hospital vessel, but not. If you look over here, here's a picture of the crew. And you notice that some of the crew has facial hair. Well, the Navy had a policy against facial hair. But if you were on a submarine, because of the water limitations, you actually could have facial hair. Right? When Zumwalt became the head of the Navy, which was in the early 70s, he allowed facial hair. So right around the early 70s, he allowed you to have facial hair. But that was Admiral's in. This is an actual battle flag off of this submarine. You notice, these are Japanese warships. These are merchant vessels, Japanese merchant vessels. And these are the ones they sunk. So that gives you an idea. There's another facsimile of a battle flag further on that has more to it, but that's what this one has. Also, the Navy has another tradition. It says that submarines are never lost. They're still on patrol. So behind you are all the submarines that are still on patrol from World War II. So they never consider them lost, they consider them still on patrol. Okay, any questions? Come with me.
Come with me if you want to live.
If you come through here, the shower's on your right, and the other hand is on your back. Everybody watch your hands. Everybody.
Smart to put the phone.
That's why we put the foam in.
I was gonna say how many people had to.
I've hit my head once or twice on this. Even with the foam, it doesn't feel good.
I have to duck to go down my basement stairs, and I
So this is,
still
everybody in? Where did Navy go?
She's loitering back there.
I think she said no.
Okay, so this is the engine room. There's one of the diesel engines. This is considered a diesel electric submarine. And basically what that means is it runs off of batteries. The batteries are charged by the diesel engine, but it primarily runs off of the batteries. In order to charge the batteries, you have to surface. You cannot run the diesel engines while you're underwater. So you had to surface. It took about 24 hours to charge the batteries completely, and then you could be submerged for about 48 hours. But in World War II, that was a long time. So you could, there's a piston off of the engine, and if you notice, there's storage all over the place. They put storage wherever they could put it, okay? Because it was tough to bring on enough food for 85 men for the time that they were out.
How long would they be submerged for at a time?
48 hours max.
Oh, okay.
Because that's all the batteries were good for.
How long on the boat
Oh, they could be
without
out.
going to land?
They could be out for 6 months. It depends on whether they can get replenished or not.
Oh my god.
But if they couldn't get replenished, they'd have to go in and get replenished.
Did you ever go on a submarine? Like,
No, thank you.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I was on
hard
service.
pass.
That's, by the way, the submarine service is all volunteer service. So the only way you got on a
Crazy
submarine was
dudes.
volunteer. It's an all volunteer service. It still is.
I'm surprised I have enough people volunteer.
Just watch your head.
Only that I can see. She mentioned that there was a little bit of a busy feeling because we're going to submarine listing, so that might be it. So right now we're in the manifold room for the engines. That noise that you hear right now is what it would sound like while this was running. Okay, that's what it would sound like in here while the diesel engines are running. When the batteries are running, relatively quiet. This device right here, this was done when they reconfigured this submarine. It's called a snorkel, and it works just like a snorkel that you would swim with. So what they would do is they would be able to partially surface, get this up above the water level, and pull in fresh air. However, it put up a nice wake. And that meant that the enemy could see it. And so it was only used when they were able to scan the ocean and make sure there was no ships around them. And they could surface, pull in fresh air, and continue on without having to worry about being shot at. So that's what this was for. Now, this section that we're gonna go through is the tightest section that we're gonna see on this boat. I walk sideways through it because it is tight. I just wanted to see you jump again. I knew it was going on, I just wanted to wait until it actually came out. Let's go.
How long are we gonna be in this really tight part?
And it's about less than a minute.
Could I just wait over here?
Not if you wanna get out, you can.
Oh my god, okay, well, I'll go. Yep.
Alright, you're gonna do it. Deep breaths, you got it.
Don't forget the leg is sometimes there. Last time.
It's really tight through there. Not a nice wall, so. I heard somebody was trying to get out.
Is that a reflection?
Oh, I needed one. Thank you. I just needed red glasses.
You can now stand up straight again. Well, almost. All right, this is the torpedo boat. So remember we talked about the fact that in order to earn your dolphin, you had to learn every job on the boat. One of the jobs you had to learn was how to load torpedo tubes. So this yellow torpedo here is a practice torpedo. They would load that into the torpedo tube, fire it out into the ocean, but it's filled with air, it float right to the top. This whole thing was configured different. This is configured for us to get people in and out. There would be a crane and they would lift the torpedo back in and put it back on the rack. And they would do it all with manpower. So this whole thing was designed to teach people how not to touch it. I mean, how to run it. If you notice, this is a different flag. This has some other configurations on it. These are the merchant ships. These are merchant ships, but they're unconformed. These are small merchant vessels, and the Kangaroo and the Stripes. This boat was stationed in Australia. It did almost all its tours up around in the Philippines and in that area. And it did 4 tours out of Australia.
You made it all the way back up here.
Pardon?
And then it came all the way back up here.
No, it wasn't stationed. It was stationed in Perth, Australia. Okay? Now, the other thing is, this submarine sank the Niagara, which is the ship that initially hit the Juno. So this submarine actually sank the Niagara. Any questions? You have now completed your tour.
Thank you.
You can all get sheriff's badges. Nothing? Okay. We're gonna go up here and out. We're done.
Thank you so much.
Okay, right this way.
I know.
They're not yellow.
Yeah. They're just all painted the same color, so. Oh my god, it just moved. Okay.
I just told you.
I know, I said thank you for
Oh, all right. Thought it was gonna be a thing. We're gonna have to put down some fisticuffs. You're not? Thought you were.
Pots across.
Yeah, just get some pots. Yeah, flowers.
I don't know what's going on with that group though.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What was going
I
on
don't
there?
know what they're all
Silly kids. They were silly kids.
laughing and stuff.
Because they're silly kids.
Probably lots of die.
Right. Because they're silly kids.
I don't see the humor.
No.
Except that he made a joke.
Say again?
I said, except that the guy made a joke about like something mess out or
Oh.
sleeping quarters.
I think if you're there or if you're part of it, you make the jokes.
Yes.
It's
I know.
fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair. The rest of us,
Yeah.
we shut up.
Yeah, you should. I didn't say anything.
I didn't see anything. No, I didn't see little Erie.
Oh.
Boys kicking.
They don't know. They want to go home and play their. They make Ataris?
I know.
I was gonna say Mortal Kombat, or not Mortal Kombat. Call of Duty. That's it. Oh, in the planes?